Next one I want to talk about, Arthur Newman, obviously, is one I did talk about just a little bit when it came out a while back, and I figure this is a little more. We can just go a little bit more into it. As I pretty much just kind of glossed over it last time, and like I said, I had a different opinion of her, which it turns out this is a movie that actually like really matters, in particular. So. First things first about Arthur Newman. It's worth noting that it's one of those movies where you're either with it or you're not. Like, that's one of those things you have to, like, decide almost immediately, given the story and the decisions the characters make and what it is exactly that they do. You're gonna either... the character's gonna be able to pull you in almost right away, or you're gonna be so far away from this movie, like connection wise, it's just gonna be a lost cause. It is worth noting also that the screenwriter Becky Johnston wrote The Prince of Tides, and apparently this was written somewhere in the 90s, also around that time, and it was going to be a reunion between her material and Nick Nolte in the lead, which would have been very interesting, but obviously, fast forward to like 2013 or so when this came out. I think it had a festival run in 2012 and then officially came out in 13. So we've got Colin Firth now as our lead, which is a promising start. Looking like he pretty much walked right off the set of A Single Man, despite the fact that there's like 3 or 4 years apart here. And so he's obviously in this really sort of stuck position where he's like got this sort of dull managerial job at FedEx. He's got this seemingly distant relationship with his girlfriend Anne Heche, and his son Lucas Hedges seems to pretty much hate him. And there's a distance between pretty much everything in his life and himself. And he's got like, you know, he's like used to be a golfer, and I guess it's weird. I read somewhere that apparently Colin Firth had not only never played golf, but that he had this sounds a bit far-fetched, but apparently he had never even seen golf played before he played this former golfing pro. Okay, so he's got to work with that, and also just in general with this character and the casting of Firth, it is sort of a good piece of casting in the sense that Colin Firth is one of those guys that like he obviously for a while he was known for being like, you know, the dashing leading man type, and he still could be, but there's also like he's also like really good at playing pitiful as well, and he seems to find some sort of middle ground here that's mostly leaning in the pitiful direction. Like I said, he's one of those characters where like if you're not into him right away, it's gonna seem like how are we supposed to stick with a guy throughout this story that would do what he does at the very beginning of it, that basically just said like he feels a distance between all of these people, so his decision is to fake his death, take on another life, and then just move on, with a stranger, no less. And so, yeah, it really just depends on if he has enough charm, or he can bring just enough of a likability, or at least an interest. Obviously, likability and interest do not always go together, so you can still definitely find him to be an interesting character that you're interested in watching, even if you think, what a piece of shit, or what a weirdo, or whatever. So it's not very long at all before he runs into a character named Mike, who does not look like who you would think a Mike would look like. It's actually Emily Blunt. Michaela, of course, being the full name. But what we have here is, like, as soon as we see her, she's also got a challenge on her hands in regards to, similarly to how we feel, or potentially how we feel about Firth going in, whether it's entirely one thing or entirely another. And what her task here is that we immediately learn this is one of those women that just kind of, she just sort of bounces around and just kind of seems to like use people and has a lot of like, you know, connectionless, loveless sex and all that other stuff. So, like, when he takes her into the hospital, like, when he says, I don't know her, the first thing the guy says is, yeah, that's what they all say, or that's what the last guy said. And it pretty much immediately sets up that this character could be quite untrustworthy and maybe a bit, like, soulless, more or less. So basically, her task is to make us both see where this character's coming from and why there would be something rational or reasonable to make this character do this without being a terrible person or coming off as a terrible person in the long run. So when we first see her, she's obviously like extremely broken and drunk, and it comes off as drunk. It actually turns out that she's been chugging cough syrup all night, at least 2 bottles of it. There's a point in time where the doctor says, we asked her why she chugged 2 bottles of cough syrup, and she said, because I had a bad cough. And it's like, that's one of those lines where I kind of wish we'd have gotten to see Blunt deliver it, because I'm sure it would have been priceless, especially for this character and just that direction she's coming from. Not to mention, she's obviously, like, this is the most, like, photogenic you've ever seen somebody that's got, like, the mascara running and is just completely shit-faced on whatever the hell, or drugged up on whatever the hell. But so there is something in this performance that sort of immediately grabs us regardless of what we've been told about her. And it's really not long before we see just how, like, erratic her emotions are. Because it's like, at one point, when they're at the bus station, where she really, really does not want to go back to her hometown, to the point that there's, like, practically fear in her eyes when it gets brought up. And it's like, once the guy dies that Firth tries to save, she can't help but laugh in this moment because the guy giving the news accidentally rhymed. And then, like, that sort of finding a humor in it and laughing goes, like, right back into that fear and panic of that she might have to leave. And it's like, just right then in those moments you can tell just how all over the place this girl's emotions are, and how, whether she's in control of that or not. And there's also sort of going to be, like, an underlying sadness in this too, because we do get sort of a look at it pretty early on that she wishes she was in more control of this than she is. And there's, not only do we get to, like, really quickly care about her, but there's also this sort of, another thing that's really sad about it, especially looking at it from Firth's perspective, is that because of, we know the way that she is and where her emotions are, any chance whatsoever, now how happy they may seem together, she could just run away at a moment's notice. Like, pretty much at the end of every scene, we just have a little bit of fear that he might turn around and she'll be gone somewhere completely. And they actually play this up in, like, a humorous way the first time, when he thinks that she's gotten on the bus and she's just standing behind it, looking at something else, looking at the newly married couple. And then, obviously, as this goes on, the characters are pretty quick to find a rhythm also, like the continuous thing where they get 2 hotel rooms, but then she always comes over because she can't sleep in the room by herself. They kind of question each other about each other's backstory, and she gets to, like, pretty much interrogating him, like, asking him about his golf life, and it's like, she's like a little kid, kind of just asking all those questions about it. And then, of course, they find that both of them have really taken to this pretending to be other people thing, and how they don't have to be themselves if they do that. And like I said, this is where the movie kind of might lose some people from the get-go. Like, if it doesn't lose you when Firth does it at the very beginning, it becomes a continuous thing for, like, the rest of the movie. That's basically the plot at this point, where they follow people around, go into their houses, pretend to be them, sometimes leave evidence of this, and then go on and do it again, over and over and over again. And it's like, yeah, obviously, there's something off about that. Even if we realize right up front that we're dealing with a character that potentially has a serious mental illness, but still, there's something that could be very off-putting about that. I think it does work, mainly because their performances are able to bring these characters to life in a way that we can understand them enough and makes them sympathetic enough, or at least she makes her sympathetic enough. Because she does have a lot more to work with than Firth does, unfortunately. And then, all in all, once we see what they do and then the way they leave the situations, it does feel more like this sort of innocent mischievousness as opposed to something more malicious or weird or creepy or something. But obviously that also comes through, like, because maybe they come off as weird stalkers or whatever, but obviously the recurring theme is this fear that she has of herself anyway. Where that's, I was reading that Blunt said that she had to read the script like 3 times over because she couldn't understand if this character was crazy or not, or where she was coming from. And she basically came to the conclusion that she's not like crazy yet, and that mental illness may or may not be there, but the main emotion that's driving her is the fear that she could be that. So that's obviously, and that really does come through quite a bit in the performance as well, and really brings it to life in a way that makes this character sympathetic as opposed to extremely off-putting, which obviously it was going to be one or the other. Like, there's really no room for middle ground. And it really just, I guess, depends on the audience in regards to how you particularly take to that. Um, there are some things here that are, like, questionable. Like, obviously we know that she's been through a lot of guys for a lot of different reasons, and it's obviously really messed with her and really sort of forever influenced how she approaches other dudes, or, the potential of finding happiness with one or whatever. So there's the moment when they really, find that connection by the pool, and he offers to carry her inside and all that. And she's like crying, and she says like, "Oh God, we don't have to have sex now, do we? Because I don't want to." It's like she's saying she will, even though she doesn't want to, because it's like she thinks that's what she's supposed to do in this scenario. And so when we see that, there's just something so, you know, something skin crawling about that, to where it's like, yeah, whatever you do, don't make her, have sex if she doesn't want to. And so it's nice. It adds another sort of innocent layer to that also, that that's not the kind of relationship they have at the start, especially for that reason. So it can seem a little skeevy and off-putting when it reaches a point in the movie when they kind of just start having sex. Very unceremoniously. There's no build-up to it. There's no, like, I mean, I guess in the montage there kind of is, but I mean, it feels pretty, given that setup, it feels pretty sudden when we're just supposed to think, oh, they're just doing that now. And it's like, how is this affecting her? And when I first saw it, I remember thinking, like, maybe they were just simulating it, for, like they do the lives of the other people. But I'm guessing, based on the expression of those people that walk in on the blowjob, we're supposed to assume this is really happening. So that's always been something I've never quite known how to take. Or what it could be doing to her character in a damaging way, but maybe it's, they've found a connection or whatever, or maybe there's something about whenever they're doing it on screen, they're pretending to be the other people, so if she's not her in this moment, maybe it's not as damaging. I don't know, but it's a little too blurry there, I think, for something that seems so, extreme in regards to her character, but yeah. There's also stuff that just seems really unrelated, and like, it's like, why do we give a fuck? Like this relationship between Anne Heche and Lucas Hedges that's happening like in between scenes, and it's like there's really not much of a purpose to this. I mean, yeah, you'll probably wonder like, how his girlfriend or his family react once they think he's dead or gone or whatever, or there's like that moment where they're uncertain. And it's like maybe we'd wonder what this looks like if they didn't show it, but now that they're showing it to us, it doesn't need to be here. There's no reason for this, especially since these characters are not near as interesting as what the hell they're doing. So I don't know what that's about, but yeah. So as I said, if you can stick with these characters and you can sympathize for them, or at least for her, because like I said, it has something. I think it has something to do with just how much Firth does or doesn't have to work with. But also, as far as strength and performance and character, she is absolutely the star of this, for sure. I mean, there's also the whole thing, I guess, where Firth's character can maybe be a bit off-putting, because usually, like I said, unless it's like really, really noticeable accents or just something that I could take or leave, but it's like Colin Firth kind of infamously struggles with an American accent, and it's like when he's trying to play an American, it's like you can tell he's trying to play an American. Not near as seamless as when Blunt does it. So maybe that'll throw you off to begin with too. But like it just makes his words sound like weird and robotic or something. But yeah. But the thing also though is that I do think they could have, when they were making the movie, I think they could have given her performance a bit more credit. Because this internal, battle she's having with herself, like, am I crazy or am I not? Or am I getting to that point, and am I going to know when I get to that point? Like, basically what she's talking about when she's talking about the ducks in the pool. But it's like, so much of this is her telling us this through dialogue. And it's like, I really feel like they could have given her much more credit and just let her performance itself do the explaining for that and give us that vibe that she has this internal debate. Because she could do that with just emoting. She really could. The character does not need this much expository dialogue for how she feels about herself. So I think if they toned that down a little bit, I think it definitely would have... She could have absolutely done that. But... yeah, but then, of course, we get to the ending, and it is... I mean, it does seem like kind of a bizarrely simple ending, and it's like you kind of wonder what all the repercussions are of this that we'll never know. But as far as she goes, there is, like, a sort of closure that, like, is kind of a sigh of relief, because you think about the whole, yeah, I got a twin sister, and, she's insane and all that, and it's like... There's a potential chance that this is a stretch of the truth, especially given the character. So it's like there's actually kind of a relief when she actually goes there and we see there actually is a twin sister. Because it's like there's kind of that uncertainty through the whole movie. It's like, is this a lie she keeps saying throughout the whole thing? Because it's like, sure, she's got her sister's ID, but it's her with a different hairstyle. Of course, this could be her. So I do like that they kind of closed that up. They closed her story by saying... she was telling the truth the whole time, and there is something, like, genuine about her, even if it seemed like she's trying to dance around the truth as much as she possibly can. And we do feel like she sort of fully embraces her life by the end of it. I said, I don't know if you could say the same thing about Firth. That's probably where a lot of the movie's shortcomings lie. This did not do well with critics or anything, so I'm sure it was, you can imagine why it was torn apart, but for the most part, like I said, I was able to especially sympathize with her character in particular, which really helps in getting through the whole thing and being able to stick with it enough to at least see what's going to happen next without being pissed off or frustrated or something, so... yeah, so that's how I feel about this. I think that pretty much lays out the whole either you take to it or you don't thing. So yeah, just a very simple, small thing that was thrown out in theaters most people forgot about. And then we moved on, which is what we're going to do now. So